welcome back to the Across the Pod podcast. It's a time, once again, like last season, to do our season previews with a fan of every team in the NFL. And our first team is the Seattle Seahawks. And with me, I've got a returning guest, someone I'm proud to call friend. I've got with me Girvane Bila. How are you, mate?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on here. Can't wait to talk about this upcoming season as opposed to what happened last season. Well, not what happened last season, but the prediction I had last season. It's the tone's gonna be much more different this time around.
Yeah, I mean, listeners who haven't heard Javan yet on our podcast, he went on for our season preview last time, and we're going to go through what he went through last year and what the actual record was in what was, certainly one of the surprise teams of last season in the Seattle Seahawks. So yeah, going into the main ins and outs. The main outs include Travis Homer and Rashad Penny, both running backs, leaving. Shelby Harris, as well as Quinton Jefferson. And then incomings, Draymond Jones, defensive end, safety Julian Love, defensive tackle Jaron Reed, linebacker Devin Bush, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, center Evan Brown, and then the one that everyone loved, the return of linebacker Bobby Wagner. And also, as well as that, one of the best drafts, in my opinion, getting Devon Witherspoon, the cornerback, fifth overall, as well as getting Jackson Smith and Jigba, 20th overall, the wide receiver from Ohio State, as well as other players such as running back Zach Charbonnet, 52nd overall, and Derek Hall, 27th overall, the defensive end. So for you, Javan, how would you assess the incomings and outcomings, both free agency wise and also the draft?
I think we did just about as well as we could have done. I'll go to the draft first. The draft for me was a great draft. Not only mainly because okay, the names we've grabbed, that what we had in the class was a really like quarterback heavy draft as we kind of all predicted going in. But I think what we've grabbed in, Witherspoon and Smith and Jigba and players like Mike Morris, I think we've done a great job in securing guys that will develop, but can actually be, solid and reputable for us now. Yeah, I'm not gonna um, I'm not gonna act like these players are, the finished article, far from that. But these guys are, to me, they're NFL ready. And that's a good sign, especially for the scope of the team especially for the scope of the team right now and the current state that we're in. We're in I would say, better than what we thought we were kind of state. Now, do these picks put us in a good position or a bad position? I think they put us in a good position for wherever we go, to be fair.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that we saw it last year as well. The players you brought in last year via the draft, brilliantly worked by Pete Carroll, the head coach, and John Snyder, the general manager. And I think that it's just once again this summer again been another off season where you've just really excelled off the field and on the field. You're hoping that it can be as good as last year. Of course, last year, where everyone entered the season with Geno Smith, Drew Lock, the worst quarterback room in the league, and I probably wasn't the only one who thought that. And all these things were obviously Russell Wilson got traded. You may have got the draft capital coming in, but everyone was like, "What's going on? Why is we got rid of Russell Wilson?" And they were thinking, Why haven't they replaced him?" But Geno Smith had by far his best career year. I mean, he won. I think wrongly, but he won Comeback Player of the Year. Obviously, shows how good he was. I mean, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and 4,282 yards. That by far beats his previous best of 13 touchdowns in 2014 with the New York Jets and 3,046 yards in 2013 with the Jets. So a real career year for him. And we saw, particularly, I think, especially the first half of the season, how good he was. You could maybe argue his form definitely downturned since the Germany game, but nevertheless, brilliant season from Geno Smith. And it's a team that got to the playoffs, of course, which no one expected. Everyone was thinking, but maybe even bottom of the division. So for Geno Smith, for you, Javan, how are you viewing him for this season? Because you can make an argument that he could stick the same level, he could make his game go even better. He could elevate it. But on the flip side, we've seen this before with other quarterbacks. Could he be a potential one season wonder? What's your take on him?
Uh, you know, one season wonder I feel in the NFL is, one season wonders in the NFL are is a very harsh thing because I feel like the NFL, as in sports in general, I feel like American sports in general, they work in cycles. So you will have players that, maybe their time, isn't there yet. And then they get to a point where they do have their time. I think that was the case for Geno. You clearly saw it at the New York Jets. He came in, probably wasn't his time amidst all the turmoil that was happening at the Jets at that particular time. And then you come to Seattle where there's a whole load of, I'll tell you, it's a lot more, there's a lot more consistency. It's not as much of a roller coaster as it was when he was at New York. And the way how he's played, it showed testament to that, to the consistency and just how well drilled Seattle kind of is. Now, for the new season, I don't think he will produce this level of performance. I do think he will have a slight drop, but what I've been reading from people or from articles, journalists suggesting that he's just gonna suddenly, you know, dramatically decline to a position where he basically makes us, the worst team in our division is. I don't think that's true, mainly because of how well drilled Seattle is. I don't think he'll get, 30 TDs, 11 interceptions. I think what you will see is maybe someone who has, maybe 20 to 27 touchdowns, maybe a few, maybe like one, two, three more interceptions. But I think that's okay considering the position that we are in. We're in a state where we're kind of just in the, middle of the pack, I would say, in terms of, no one really expected us to be that good. And everyone expected us to be that bad. So we're kind of in the middle of that. But for Geno, I think Geno will have another good year. Whether he'll have the year he had in the season that's just passed, I'm not really too sure. But I don't think he's gonna have, a horrific year.
Yeah, I think it really is interesting. I think there's a few quarterbacks you can make that chat about whether they will continue their form. And I think Brock Purdy is the biggest example of that, whether he can be the same quarterback we all saw when he came in mid-season. And that is quite a nice segue into our next real talking point is the fact that Russell Wilson obviously was traded last off season, was on a university field trip at the time with some of our course mates, mine and yours, Javan, to the likes of Colin, broke the news to me when that trade got released. And there was definitely a narrative, and I believe I talked to you about it. Maybe it was about someone else. Definitely it was someone about this on our podcast where we felt that Pete Carroll was holding Russell Wilson back. But what's transpired is Pete Carroll knew the time was coming to an end, and fully aware that Russell Wilson may well become the quarterback we all know with Sean Payton as a head coach. And that could all change. But right now, he had a terrible 2022. One of the worst, certainly the worst season in his career. One of the worst seasons for a quarterback, or more underwhelming seasons for a quarterback I can ever remember. I remember I was at the Broncos Colts game, maybe arguably the worst ever game of football ever played. It's certainly up there, certainly the worst I've ever seen, and certainly the worst. One it's between that and Bristol Rovers Wickham for the worst live event I've ever watched. But he was terrible, and we had this feeling that it was Pete Carroll. He was getting too old. He was getting too like Arsene Wenger. It felt like an Arsene Wenger sort of time at Seattle, where it was almost he was staying there just for nostalgia. But what we've seen since, he's done it. He's for me one of the best head coaches last season. The job's done. I think certainly he'd have been one of my picks for coach of the year. But for you, just how did you feel watching Russell Wilson's downfall? Were you one of the ones that were really glad to see it? Were you someone that still want to see him do well? And how was it for you watching Russell Wilson firstly in a different uniform, especially that week one clash between both your teams? But yeah, overall, how was it? How did you feel about Russell Wilson's downfall compared to Geno Smith's rise?
Honestly, to react to, we actually did have this conversation whether as to Pete Carroll was holding back Russell Wilson. It got to a point where I believe me and you had a conversation, numerous conversations about whether one had to give. And I believe I chose Pete Carroll to give because of the years, because of just the great years Russell Wilson was having at Seattle. Going to watching his demise, I can't lie, it was incredible to see, and incredible to see him mocked on national TV for just how he was playing, or on the debate shows, Undisputed and ESPN. It was incredible to see. It hurt Shannon Sharp literally because of how he's a big part of the Denver Broncos. Um, I will say, I think what you saw in the two seasons in the two guys in that season was how they used that moment, and kind of how they allowed the moment to either consume them or use it as fuel. I believe all the chatter between what happened in the trade, it fueled Carroll. It fueled him to a point where you could honestly see that this was a this, if anything, this season of Geno, rising and becoming, the comeback player of the year, that's fueled from, the chatter that we were hearing about Carroll, about how his time is done. I'm hearing that with Belichick now. I'm not saying that Belichick is gonna have the same, type of season as Carroll had, but you know, one thing I love about the NFL is you can have the physical attributes, you could have the technical attributes, but the mental attributes count just as much, if not more. And you saw it in Pete Carroll, the mental attribute he had to say to himself that, okay, I've just let my best quarterback go, my best player go. Now watch me actually go to work, watch that actually fuel me and use that as fire to have this type of season. Whereas Russell, it just consumed him a bit. Add to the fact that he had a coach in Nathaniel Hackett who struggled, and in turn that caused everybody to struggle. It didn't look like anybody kind of knew what their role was or kind of what to do. So I think what you'll see in Sean Payton in what he was going to do for Denver now is just pretty much, you know, put it all back to the basics. What's everyone good at? And I think that's what Pete Carroll did um last that's what Pete Carroll did last year. And you're gonna see Sean Payton kind of use that because he is a great coach and he has great mental attributes as well.
Yeah, I think what we'll see this year. I think certainly we'll see this year with Russell Wilson whether his bad year last year was all on Hackett or whether this season, if he plays bad again, we'll know that it wasn't entirely Hackett's fault. A bit like you look at Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. Is this going to be a season where you look at last season as being a year where he just clearly wasn't happy in Green Bay and that's why his performances dropped? Or you could look at it as if he struggles in New York, which I hope he does, it'll be a case where we'll know that he's getting too old. And I think Russell Wilson will be the same thing. I think that you look at what he's got compared to Geno Smith. I think actually Geno's got far better options to throw to. I mean, looking at the depth chart for the Seahawks, I mean, Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. Whilst I preferred Jordan Addison, I think the consensus was that Smith and Jigba was the best receiver in the draft, and he's the third choice receiver behind obviously DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And I think you add that to a tight end room with Noah Fant as your main guy, of course, adding in it, and as well as I think offensive line which could do some work, but overall it's not the worst. So I think Geno Smith is actually going to go into the season, I think, with a far better team and I think a far better receiving room. And I think that you look at even on the defense, you've got Witherspoon, you've got Jamal Adams, you've got Jordan Brooks, Bobby Wagner, Tariq Woolen, who was a great pick for you guys. I think that you're going to have as well, which I think you may see in Denver as well, but with Seattle, I think you're going to see a case where these guys are going to give them the ball back so much more. And it's going to be great for everyone involved. And I think it's actually there's more lead on segue into our final segment, which is our win, loss, and tie section, which everyone loves by now. That's everyone's favorite part of the podcast, where we go through each game and Girvane has to answer with win, loss, or tie. Before we do that, of course, you're our first guest of the series. You were on it last season, so your record prediction last year was 5-13.
Yeah.
Of course, the team finished 9-8. So yeah, I mean that shows alone just how much they better they perform than we thought. I'm guessing it's not going to be 5-13 this time when you go for
Nope.
it. Right.
I can't believe I can't believe I predicted that. In all honesty, to be fair, I felt like it was justified at the time, but as we got to the season when we were picking up wins, I was like, goodness gracious, I'm gonna have to take back the win and loss column that I produced.
Well, to be fair, we had a Packers fan, Abby, last season who ended up going 16-0. And friend of the show, Chris Milner from National Vintage League, you'll see him again throughout this season. He had the Washington Commanders finishing with, I think it was 11 or 12 wins. So there were some quite optimistic fans, but you were quite a realist. You were quite level-headed in your approach. You were realistic about what we all thought was going to happen. So I think you'd rather be that way than the other way around. At least you had a nice surprise. Whereas this year, I think it might be a bit more a higher expectation. So week one, you are at home. Another team who really underwhelmed last year, Los Angeles Rams, win, loss or tie.
I'll win. I think they're gonna go into the season. They're probably in this. Going into the season that we're gonna have. They're probably the worst team in the NFC. So I think we're gonna win.
Second.
I think so.
Well,
I
our next episode is going to be about another team who I think personally is the worst team in the NFC. And a little spoiler, they may not be my prediction in our predictions episode to have the number one overall pick coming next year. I think the Cardinals have got it worse.
funny. Those are two teams we know very well.
Yeah, and I can see why you got them. And I actually think that the Rams are going to surprise people. I don't think they're going to go on a deep run. I think that their ceiling is probably one win, but it all hands on the balance of Donald, Cup, and Stafford. If they're all healthy, it's 12 months removed from them winning Super Bowl. Well, probably 18 months removed now, but it is only one season away. And this time last year, they were going into season as the champions, and everyone thought week one might be a preview to the upcoming Super Bowl. So I think that people forget just how injury hit they were, and I think that they've lost Jalen Ramsey, yes, and they've lost a few other players, But I think my pick is that I think their seeding is wild card team, and then maybe at most one playoff win. I think that'll be very much depending on just who they get, because I think that the NFC South, I think if they get NFC South team, that'll be their way. That'll be their way of getting through. But I think if they face anyone besides maybe the Bears from the NFC North, they play anyone from the NFC East besides maybe the Commanders and two of the four NFC West, I think they'll lose. But I think if they somehow finish with the fifth seed and they come up against the team who won the NFC South or whatever ranking they are, and if they do meet, I think that's their way to go against. So I think the Rams actually are going to surprise people. I think of Sean McVay, who can forget him. Week two on the road to everyone's second team in 2022, the Detroit Lions, win, loss or tie.
We're gonna go with another win here.
Okay. Week three, back at home against the Carolina Panthers, of course, with the number one overall pick in Bryce Young as their new quarterback. Probably his first or second game at home during in the NFL. What's your take on that one?
I think that's gonna be a win. I think that's gonna be a. I think Bryce Young's gonna have a really rough game. I think we're gonna make it rough for him. So I think we're gonna go with a win there.
Mm. Yeah, I still think the Panthers will rue the day they didn't pick CJ Stroud, in my opinion, anyway. I think he's the best of the four. Week four, on the road again, against the New York Giants.
That's a loss. Mainly because I just think with Barkley and the team, I just think that's a game where he just goes off, and that's when he has the level of game that we know he can produce. It's tough. It's tough to defend him.
Yeah, I agree. Week five is the almighty dreaded week five by week. So week six is, I think, looking at the schedule now, probably on paper your hardest game on the road to the Cincinnati Bengals.
That's a loss. That's a loss too. Mainly, I think we'll give it. I think one thing I like about the Seahawks is we won't back down, but I just think Cincinnati just pull away with the players that they just have.
Yeah, I think for me they are surely one. I think they're, unless something really bad happens, they'll be definitely the playoffs, probably as division winners. and I can see him going at least a divisional round, if not more. Now, next up on home at home again, mentioned before the Arizona Cardinals.
Well, that's gonna be a win. Not really the most convincing win. I actually have the scores for these as well.
Okay,
Um, so
so
for me, I went for a 2015 win. Not really like not really the sort of like humiliation that we could give to the Cardinals, but I think it'll be one where they'll put up a fight in that match too.
let's go back a second and check your score. So you said you beat the Rams week one. What's the score on that one?
I got 31 to 27.
That's a good game. Wow, for week one as well. Lions win. What's the score there?
I got 34 to 30.
Oh, another good game. I swear last year, I think it was that game that was like, I want to say something like 45-42 or something. I thought there was a thrilling game between you two last season. Is that right?
I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah,
They
that was
I think with I think with Detroit, they're just like win, lose, or even tie. They're a very entertaining team to watch. I watched their game where they played Green Bay. I believe that was the last game of the season. It was a very entertaining game. Even though I have no affiliation to either team, for some reason, Detroit, I feel like a lot of it comes from their coach as well. They just love to entertain.
yeah, and you guys really spoilt the party with that win against the Rams on the final week.
Yeah.
It made the game entirely pointless, but either way. It was still a good. I quite enjoyed seeing Rodgers get knocked out, if I'm honest. The Panthers win. What's the score on that one?
I had 23 to 21.
All these games are very tight. Wow. Giants lost week four. What's the score there going to be?
26 to 20.
Okay, and then the bye week, the Bengals game.
33 to 24.
Okay, so going on to week eight against everyone's least favorite team right now in the Cleveland Browns. Who's going to win, and what's the score going to be?
I'm gonna go with a win for us. It's a 27 to 20 win.
Oh, I'd love to see that. Week nine on the road again to the Baltimore Ravens.
Goodness. This is gonna be a 30 to 15 loss because I just think Jackson is just gonna have one of those games.
They are one of these teams that you just don't know who you're getting each week. A bit like Tottenham, if I'm honest. Week 10 against the Commanders.
Commander is gonna be a very tight game for that one. I'm gonna go with a 19 to 17 win.
Okay. Um, Once again, back into Rams, this time on the road at SoFi Stadium.
That'll be a loss, 26 to 23. I think they'll want revenge for the week one loss that they had to us, and we will come off. We'll have one of those games where we're good in some parts, but sluggish overall.
And then on to week 12, a home game against the San Francisco 49ers.
We ha- okay, this is gonna sound. I need you to hear me out on this. I'm gonna go with a win, only because we didn't beat them all season last. We didn't beat them all season last year, especially in the playoff game where we lost to them. I feel like we let's take a win, uh, based on the fact that we didn't win against them in the three opportunities we had last season.
To be fair, even in the wild card game, there was a point. I believe you were winning at half time, or at least you're running them close, and second half just wasn't quite what you're hoping for. But I know you guys definitely gave a good run for their money, and it wasn't as much of a one-sided affair as I think we all thought it was going to be. So yeah, you fair play. You guys run them close, and I think you hope. I think for me, I think we're between you two for the division. So I think these games are going to mean a lot. They're going to really mean something. We got them again in 2 weeks after that. So in between that, the filling in the sandwich is the Dallas Cowboys on the road, AT&T Stadium. How are you feeling about that one?
I don't know how to feel about the Cowboys this year. It's just also it's the expectations on them are going to be very big, mainly because of the fact that um they're in this sort of position now where they're contenders, but it's just I don't know whether they're true contenders or not. Are you there mainly because of the resources that you have, or are you there mainly because you have a place that actually you have a place that's actually warrants you being there? Um, this will be a close game, but I think we'll edge it, and I think I'm gonna go with a 32-27 win on our end.
Okay, 32-27. That's quite, again, these games are very, very exciting. Week 14, you once again playing the 49ers, but this time on the road.
That would be a loss. 26-17. That would be the 49ers revenge for week 12. And Debo Samuel. Goodness gracious me. I think he had one of those games. I love Debo Samuel, by the way, great player.
You know, I remember I was watching a video. It was literally was about I think 4 hours ago, where it was basically TPS did a video on YouTube where they had every team's active player who was most likely to not make the Hall of Fame, and they said Debo Samuel was a lock for the Hall of Fame. And I don't think that's true. If I'm honest, he's had maybe 1 or 2 good years, and that's it. I don't think he's really replicated that season he had 2 years ago. I don't think he'll. I think that hearing that was a bit of a stretch, if I'm honest, but still, nevertheless, a very good player. God, this stretch you've got is terrible. When you've had the 49ers twice, then you had the Cowboys in between that. Now you've got week 15 at home to the Philadelphia Eagles. That's quite a bad run.
That's gonna be a thrashing. That'll be a thrashing where it will be 34 to probably 10 or 17. I'm gonna go with 17. Um, 34-17 to the Eagles. I think the Eagles are for real. How far they go, I don't know, but I think they're the NFC version of basically Cincinnati.
Hey, that's interesting. I think personally, I think there's always is a team that surprised everyone gets involved in amongst mix. I think these two, the 49ers and Eagles, I think for me the best two by a mile in this conference. I think if Dak Prescott could get it done when it matters, I think you'd have them involved, but I don't think he's that guy. So yeah, I think those two will be very hard to find those two not playing. Certainly, at least one of them in the NFC Championship game this season. Week 16 on the road to Tennessee Titans.
I'm gonna go with a 20-10 win on our end.
Okay, and then week 17 is a home game, your final one of the season. Certainly in the regular season, is the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Pittsburgh, that's gonna be a win as well. I'm gonna go over 27-17 win.
And then finally going into week 18, your current record stands at 10-6. So you think going into the final game of this season, if it does happen to how you're predicting, you think it'd be a crucial game, whether it's to make the playoffs or whether it's to win the division. So how are you feeling with that one, and how's it going to go?
I think it'll be a 31-20 win for us.
Okay, so that means your record is 11-6, which is your third prediction of the season. That's you would think, especially in the NFC, that will get you into the playoffs, and maybe even as a second or third seed. At worst, maybe even a fifth seed if the 49ers just absolutely blow people away. So yeah, as a bonus sort of prediction for you, if you were to make the playoffs, how far do you think the team will go?
I don't. Okay, so the NFC is much weaker, I believe, this year compared to last year. Um, so if we want to make a deep playoff run, I think we need to maximize this opportunity before Geno Smith starts to show rapid signs of regression. I also think it depends on whether Jamal Adams can stay fully healthy. Bear in mind, we finished 9-8 with him practically out for the season. So with him fully, in for a season, and if he's able to recapture just some patch of good form, I think we could do something. I think I still believe I want to believe we could get to the divisional round, but I highly doubt it because again, I just think even though the NFC is much weaker, I think the good teams are really, really good. I can't. I've obviously just judged Dallas before, but Dallas are a good team. Dallas for me are a good team. They're going to be there or thereabouts. Same with the 49ers, same with the Eagles, even the Giants, I think. Um, so I think it will be another wild card loss. I'd love to just make the division round. That will probably depend on who we get in a wild card, to be fair. Um, but I think we are gonna make a wild card appearance, and pretty much anything happens after there is anyone's guess.
Interesting, interesting. Well, teasing it a little bit, but I've got a little prediction up my sleeve for our predictions episode. As my surprise team, but also my team to win the NFC, and it could well be not one of those teams. It could be a team that no one is saying. So I'm looking forward to eventually giving that prediction out. If nothing changes by this point from recording this podcast mid-July, so things might change. But as right now, I got a team back of my head that I think could surprise everyone and win the NFC. But do keep an eye out for that one. And in the meantime, this has been our Seattle Seahawks season preview, our first of 32 teams done. Our next team is going to be the Arizona Cardinals. So if you're a Cardinals fan, listen to this one. Keep an eye out for that one. And after that, it will be the 49ers. So very NFC West themed start to this series, as hoping to once again complete all 32 teams with a fan of all 32 teams. In the meantime, thank you, Girvane, for once again coming on.
Pleasure having me. Pleasure having me on here. It's always good to be here.
Yeah, always a pleasure, mate. And but sure, once again, we'll have you on during the season and get your thoughts on how the season's going when it all kicks off, which is a time of recording just over 2 months away. And when this podcast does come out, less than 2 months away. So exciting stuff. The long off season looks like it's finally coming to an end. In the meantime, this has been the Across the Pod podcast as part of the Eurotrips network. I've been your host, Andy. This has been Girvane, and we will see you guys next time.